This is the second part of Read Aloud for pages 240 to 247. We're going to start on page 245 with the sea as friend from book 10, 11, 12, 13 of the Odyssey. And even as on a plain, a yoke of 4 stallions comes springing all together beneath the lash, leaping high and speedily accomplishing the way, so leaped the stern of that ship. The dark waves of the sounding sea rushed mightily in the wake, and she ran ever surely on her way. Not even a circling hawk, the swiftest of winged things, could keep pace with her. Even thus she lightly sped and cleft the waves of the sea. So when the star came up, the brightest of all, heralding the light of early dawn, even then did the seafaring ship draw nigh the island. There in the land of Ithaca is a certain harbor, with 2 headlands of sheer cliff that slope to the sea and break the mighty wave that ill winds roll without. But within, the ships ride unmoored when once they have reached the place of anchorage. At the harbor's head is a long-leaved olive tree, and close by is a cave, pleasant and shadowy, where the honey-bees hive, and there are great looms of stone on which the nymphs weave cloth dyed of deep purple of the sea. And then there's a picture of the island. Both the Iliad and the Odyssey have been translated from Greek into many languages, including many different English translations. The selections here are adapted from a late 19th century translation by Samuel Henry Butcher and Andrew Lang. In the following selection, Homer describes how the sea can be an enemy. Here, the god of the sea, Poseidon, takes out his anger against Odysseus. Poseidon, god of the sea, shaker of the earth, gathered the clouds and troubled the waters of the deep. Grasping his trident in his hands, he roused all storms and shrouded in clouds the land and sea. And down sped night from heaven. The east wind and the south wind clashed, and the stormy west and the north, borne in the bright air, rolling onward a great wave. The wave crashed down upon Odysseus, driving him on with terrible might. The raft reeled, and far from it he fell, and lost the helm from which his hand, and the fierce blast of the jostling winds, broke his mast in the midst, and sail and yardarm fell far into the deep. Long the water kept him under, nor could he rise from beneath the rush of the mighty wave. But at last he came up and spat forth from his mouth the bitter salt water, which ran down in streams from his head. As the Odyssey shows, the sea could be a friend to the Greeks, a smooth highway and a link to others. The sea could also be an enemy and a source of chaos. It could endanger its passengers and forever sever a man from his fellow men. But it was not the sea alone that challenged most ancient Greeks. And here is an olive branch. Living on the land. The land itself defied the Greeks. Most of it was stony and hilly. Its rugged mountains and steep slopes made it hard to eke out a living. Even today there are few plains where wheat and barley can grow, or cattle can graze. In winter, harsh rains wash the soil from the hillsides, which makes those slopes poor places for growing crops. But the ancient Greeks were determined. They discovered that 2 plants would flourish there, grapevines and olive trees. These didn't seem to mind the higher slopes and thin, stony soil. In fact, their roots helped hold the soil in place. On lower lands, meanwhile, Greek farmers grew what grain they could. The Greeks came to depend on these three crops: grain, grapes, and olives. In September and October they harvested the grapes and then pressed them to make wine. After this harvesting, it was time to plant grain. The growing season for grain lasted until May or June. But the damp winter was not a time of rest. They picked olives from December through February and pressed them for oil. The hillsides made good grazing land for sturdy sheep and goats. These animals in turn provided wool for clothing as well as milk and cheese, though not much meat. The Greeks also raised pigs for food and hunted duck, wild boar, deer, and hare. For other foods they turned to the sea. Many men who lived along the coasts and on the islands fished for a living. Greece has a Mediterranean climate with mild wet winters and hot dry summers. That climate allowed the Greeks to venture onto the sea in the warm, pleasant months, and it blessed Greece with summer skies of a deep, vibrant blue. In the dry season, to a shepherd tending his flocks on the hillside, or to a sailor skimming from island to island across the wine-dark seas, the clear blue sky must have seemed like an open view to the heavens. Perhaps these clear skies, with their infinite vista of blue, lifted the thoughts of the ancient Greeks and inspired them to be a curious, creative people. It's a fanciful notion, but great ideas they surely had, as we're about to see. And we will stop there.